Throughout history, there have been events that have displayed the courage and perseverance of mankind. However, for every opportunity of greatness, there has unfortunately been the same opportunity for death and destruction. One event that sticks out to the majority of the world more so than others occurred at the tail end of the Great Depression. Like America, Germany had suffered an economic crisis. The Germans were vulnerable and felt completely defeated. The vulnerability of the people was evident to most, but especially clear to one person. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 and fought in the First World War as a dispatch runner. After rising to the rank of corporal, Hitler's military career was virtually non-existent until his officers realized his oratory skills. Switching him to a political officer gave him the ability to lecture soldiers on politics and his beliefs.
Allein liegt die Zukunft des deutschen Volkes.
By 1920, Hitler's oratory skills had allowed him to start the Nazi Party with a base of 2,000 followers. By 1933, the Nazi Party had taken over all the political aspects of Germany, and Hitler was now the Chancellor of Germany. In 1941, with this power, Hitler started to support his personal views of Jews on a national scale.
The Nazi Party in Germany started to become very active and aggressive.
Hitler's anti-Jewish views led to the largest extermination of humans in the history of mankind. In the Holocaust, men, women, and children were gassed, beaten, shot, starved, and even burned to death. With Hitler and the German army committing such brutal crimes on the Jews, it is a miracle that any of them survived. Edgar Krasa, a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor, was kind enough to share his story with us. Edgar was born in a small town in Czechoslovakia long before the existence of the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Edgar's hometown was primarily inhabited by Jewish families. Czechoslovakia had no prior friction with Germany until Hitler came to power. When Hitler decided to advance through the borders of Czechoslovakia, news of the German ways spread so rapidly through the country it preceded that of the German army. After the adults in Edgar's town heard that Hitler's SS was en route, they shared a piece of advice with the teenagers of the town.
So it was suggested that I learn to be a cook, so I never have to go hungry. And it was a good idea for those times, and even later it was beneficial.
It wasn't until the tension with the Germans rose that this advice proved to be useful. When German forces eventually arrived in Edgar's village, they immediately ordered that Edgar's family, and the entire town be moved to a ghetto in Prague. Terezin was the name of the ghetto that Edgar and his family was moved to. Terezin was an old military fortress constructed hundreds of years before the Holocaust.
So it wasn't really a ghetto, a permanent ghetto. It was a transition station for transshipment of the Jews to Poland.
Edgar was recruited to be a cook, in charge of supplying all of Terezin with the little food that they were allowed.
Few basics, the potatoes and some flour and a little sugar if you were lucky.
After several months in the ghetto, many Jews started to suffer from depression, and the overall morale of the ghetto was rapidly decreasing. Camp morale got so low, it was hard to scrape together any sense of hope from anyone. As the restrictions became more harsh towards the Jews and the Jewish laws were put into place, people thought all hope was lost.
They proceeded to apply the so-called Jewish laws, which really were anti-Jewish laws.
These laws further restricted Jewish activity and made it so that every Jew had to wear the Star of David, which was sewn onto all of their clothes. Within the star read the word Jude, which was the German word for Jew. Jude was written in Hebrew lettering, but in the German language to further degrade the Jews. When Terezin reached a low point, one man stepped up whom Edgar considered to be a true hero. This man started a choir which met secretly in the basement of a building in the middle of Terezin.
In the evening, after everybody finished their assigned job, he encouraged the men to come to the basement and started with them to sing Czech folk songs that most people knew, and if not the whole thing, then parts. And it was in their language, so they learned fast. It took us away for an hour, hour and a half, from sitting on the bunk and brooding about the new oppressions. Also, in addition to the next day at work, people were humming those tunes and already thinking of coming back to in the evening to sing again.
After a few months, Edgar was offered to be a chef at another ghetto. Little did Edgar know, he did not have a choice. When he tried to decline the offer, his life and the lives of his parents were threatened.
Being one of only 2 cooks, he asked me if I would volunteer and go with the very first group to that ghetto, set up kitchens and train people to work in them.
However, if Edgar agreed to go, a German officer of Terezin promised Edgar that his parents would remain unharmed. Edgar packed a small suitcase with his few belongings and left what he had known to be his home for the past few months. Edgar boarded a cargo train, each car cramming upwards of 70 people.
No food and no drink was supplied, and 70 people per wagon, and not enough space for everyone to sit down at the same time. And when somebody was exhausted and fell down, lay down, there was even less space. So we were in those wagons 3 days. We needed, I checked after the war, only about 4 to 5 hours from Terezin to Auschwitz.
Little did Edgar know, Auschwitz is one of, if not the most notoriously horrific concentration camps of the time. As Edgar walked through the gates, he realized that he was in a hell much different than Terezin.
Tall chimney spewing black smoke, and even some sparks came out. And naively I asked the guard next to me, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, that's the bakery. They must have burned a lot of bread." I later found out from prisoners who were there before us that this one chimney, one of 5 chimneys belonging to 5 crematoria, with a total capacity of cremating 10,000 people a day.
Edgar, sickened by his surroundings, was given one pair of striped clothing, which he was to never change out of. He was put into a line where he had gotten his head shaved by a dull razor with no shaving cream, leaving his and the head of many others hacked up and bloody. After his head was shaved, Edgar and the other thousands of new arrivals stood in line to receive an identification number.
They were giving us a number tattooed on our arm. I went to all 3 or 4, whoever were there, to look who does it the nicest, the neatest way. Under those chimneys, it was very important to me to have a nice tattoo. So I lined up for the one who I thought does it the nicest way.
In 1944, the US and Great Britain were moving into German territory from the west as the Soviet Union stormed the east. This was the start of the German Death March. German soldiers were told to evacuate concentration camps, destroying the prisoners before they left, or marching them hundreds of miles through inclement weather to other camps closer to the heart of Germany. Edgar and 100 of other Jews, including the 2 boys with whom he had become close, were collected and forcibly marched for days. After the onset of extreme hunger and exhaustion, Edgar knew his time had come as he turned to the boys for one last word.
I won't make it. And I was thinking of escaping, because if they shoot me on the escape, it's the same like 15 minutes later when I drop on the road. But the answer came when we arrived at a tall forest on both sides of the road. No moon was shining, so I thought this is the place. I slipped at the side of the road into a ditch and lied in the snow, face down, motionless. And regardless of that, one of those zealous guards shot me, and maybe because of the dark, his aim wasn't too good. The bullet came in under my arm, and the bullet got stuck in the rib. they didn't waste another bullet on a guy who stained so much of the snow. I thought he's finished off. So when the column passed, I picked myself up and ran into the forest.
After days of wandering the forest, injured and exhausted, Edgar found his way to an abandoned concentration camp where he and other Jews gathered and trucked back to Terezin, where Edgar found his parents healthy and alive as promised. Free of Nazi rule, Edgar and his parents moved to Israel illegally, where they lived for several years. Edgar and his wife Hannah moved to the U.S. in 1962, where they purchased a small house in Newton, Massachusetts. Edgar and Hannah still live in Newton, and Edgar tells his story to hundreds of people a week. For Edgar, America served as a safe haven and a land of opportunity, as it did for many immigrants throughout the late 19th and 20th centuries. People like Edgar are why America is as unique as it is. People like Edgar shaped America and are proof that America is a land of great opportunity and many freedoms.